What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I wanted to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down why the market kind of dipped today the way it did, what's going on with more data coming out for tomorrow, as we have important stuff coming out in the morning, not to mention more things about the way the market's moving, in my opinion. But before I break down all this information, before I talk about what's going on with Tesla, SPY, and all these different tickers, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. SPY had this very, very nice looking pennant that was developing, leading to this move to the downside. I told everyone I was favoring the downside. That's what played out so far. And for today, I also mentioned that we're also beginning to consolidate again between these levels, but I was seeing some weakness potential in the chart, and that's what's led to this other sell-off again during the after hours. I find it very interesting how, we have this interesting tendency of seeing lots of shop during the day. Then we tend to gap up or gap down. We tend to make big moves during like the pre-market or during the after hours. And you guys can see how this is really playing out. So it makes things more difficult for retail, if anything. And we've seen a lot of manipulation with the way the market is moving. These institutions knew the market was going to dip, so they gave us this fake little pump to 527, only to dump things again in the after hours. So the question is, what's going to happen for tomorrow? What is my personal opinion? Why did the market dip like this? I'll be talking about all of that in this video. But one thing worth remembering is the fact that we had quite a few Fed speakers over the last couple of days, such as Kashkari and Daly. With all these Fed speakers, they were basically insinuating that they are open to the possibility. Okay, they're open to the possibility that they may have to continue to hold rates higher for longer. With the more hawkish Fed and them potentially talking about how inflation is not necessarily out of the water just yet, and they have to be very, very cautious, this is what's causing kind of like money to outflow a little bit differently. So we're starting to see yields going up as a result of this, and this is what's causing the market to dip a bit. We're also starting to see gold slip as well as the dollar is gaining strength alongside our 10-year treasury yield going up, and this is helping the market to slow down a bit. Now, you could even argue that this is used as another excuse for them to dip the markets again, for them to buy up things at cheaper prices before we see another rally again later on. So I will go over more details about that later on, but that's what's basically happening so far. Now, how about for tomorrow? Tomorrow being Thursday, May 30th, 2024, I wanted to just call out that 1 hour before the market opens at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have quite a bit of data coming out. Please note that we have the GDP numbers coming out. That's going to be very important for the economy and the way the market views things so far. We have the GDP growth rate quarter over quarter coming out, corporate profits, not to mention the GDP sales data. That's all going to be very, very important for how the market moves and how the Fed kind of looks at the economy thus far. On top of all of that, we also have initial jobless claims coming out, continuing jobless claims, and very important data for the labor market. We will see what that leads to for us moving forward. But just know we have some important jobs numbers, not to mention GDP numbers coming out for tomorrow, and that could cause some high volatility before the market even opens. On top of that, as time goes on tomorrow, there's not really much else coming out. We just have a couple of bill auctions coming out at 11:30 a.m., then a few Fed speakers, and that's pretty much it for tomorrow. But the main pieces of data come out in the morning before market open. Now, right now, when it comes to the fear and greed index, right now things are getting very close to fear. We're starting to see more and more fear kind of making up sentiment, and this is causing a lot of shifts in different indicators. The greed is not as strong as before. It's actually dipping a little bit more because we're starting to see people kind of becoming more fearful. They're not as enthusiastic to be buying in the dips as like crazy. And then we also have the puts and call option positioning hitting fear. This is actually very important because the market's becoming a little bit more fearful. We're starting to see more puts being bought, some calls being closed, and the shorts are starting to pile into the markets again. And then the last thing is the market volatility. The VIX got a bounce, and we were talking about this because the VIX, the VIX was at the lowest level we had seen since 2019 to 2018, that period. So because the VIX was so undervalued, it was due for a bounce. I was talking about that, and that is what has happened so far. Now, is this a massive breakout on the VIX? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. There's no sign that the VIX is just like continuing to squeeze, breaking out past 20 or anything like that. This is just a small bounce so far, and we're still actually just testing our 50 daily moving average. So we just have to wait and see what the VIX does from here and how SPY and the market reacts to some very important levels. Now, when it comes to other things, I just want to call out that when it comes to big earnings, we have Salesforce, which just announced their earnings after the market is closed. And for tomorrow in the morning, we have Kohl's, Foot Locker, Dollar General, and Best Buy, not to mention Costco after the market closes. For Salesforce, the shares are down 16% on the first revenue miss since 2006. It's actually very important because despite that, Their quarterly forecast is a little bit short of expectations, and they did miss on revenue. Revenue was $9.13 billion below expectations. EPS was $2.44, a little bit above expectations, but their guidance was not the strongest for what they're expecting for the next quarter. And also for the fiscal 2025, things are just aligned with expectations. So next quarter earnings are not too strong. And on top of all of that, they missed on revenue. The first time this happened since 2006. Not the best of news for them. That's why the share price has plunged much lower. Anyways, that's enough about earnings and all the news coming out. What do the charts tell us? That's going to be very important. Of course, the charts will be affected by this data coming out, but I just want to focus on now what I see from a technical standpoint. So I was anticipating some downside in the markets, and we did call out these moves very likely as we had this high right here being established, came down, established a lower high, and we were seeing this downtrend that's continued for the last 2 to 3 days. So we were right about the market getting rejection and dipping. What is going to happen from here? So when we zoom out of SPY, just like this, I'm going to hide my drawings as well. Notice that we're at gap support right now, and we're actually starting to lose that gap support. So that makes me suspect that as our MACD is also kind of turning on the PPO, I do anticipate we're going to come down to fill this gap around 523. And then we'll be watching to see if we get a bounce in the 523s or not. If we lose the 523s, we'll be looking at the 521s and see where we bounce from there. But that's what I'm anticipating, at least so far, for SPY. Now, when we look at the 1 hour time frame, on the smaller time frames, we are kind of dipping a little bit, slowly continuing to downtrend. We have this support currently right over here around this 523 area. So I do anticipate it's going to be dipping lower. And we lost this low over here. We had this low right here around 525. So this will likely continue to lead to downside. So I personally think that SPY is going to likely fill that gap before we try to get a bounce, or we could even drop a little bit lower and then try to get the bounce after that. So we have resistance currently at about 525. This is the previous resistance becoming support where this low was. Then we have our next level is going to be 527. If that breaks, watch 528, then eventually very close to the 530 area. Those are going to be your resistance levels. For support, I'm basically going to be watching all the way down here at 523. That's going to be our next support zone, 523.5. We'll see if we bounce. I mean, I'm kind of like open-minded about that. If we lose the support, we're going to be dipping all the way down to about 521 essentially. So I'll be very, very patient and open-minded just to see how things end up moving. But that's what I'm seeing for SPY thus far. But what do I think is going to happen? In my personal opinion, I think the chart looks bearish. I think we're going to be filling the gap in the 523s. And I favor that there is going to be more downside coming all the way down to this level right here where this gap happens to be. All right. So I think SPY may pop a bit and then start dropping or even drop down to 523. And we'll see what the reaction happens to be. I anticipate more downside, and we'll see what happens once it fills the gap. Do we get a bounce or not? What's very strong relative to the market is Nvda. Nvda is holding up very, very well, especially at these key levels. Let me just pull up the hourly time frame, just like this. What you'll see is that we have resistance at 1150, and then we have support all the way down here around 1130. This is like 1135. We're just kind of trading sideways within this range. Overall, it's still holding up very well. We do have a double top leg structure, but there's no sign of us losing this support over here at 1120. So overall, Nvidia is holding up very well. I think that this has a lot of potential relative to the markets, and we could be looking for another pop like move and just a lot of sideways price action like this. If we were to lose 1135, then I'll be watching the support down here at 1121. So I anticipate it's going to continue to trade sideways, maybe get a dip if we end up losing support, but there's no sign of us losing support just yet. We're just holding up for the time being. So look for a lot of sideways price action. It's very strong compared to the market, and we'll see how things go. For Bitcoin, we came all the way down to essentially 67,000. We have resistance at 67,738, not to mention 68,000. We also have support all the way down here around at 67,000. If we lose that, I'll be looking at 66,500 as our next target. Overall, it looks to me like it might try to pop and retest the 20 EMA at 67,750, and then we could get a rejection depending on how things move. But we are on a downtrend right now. There's a very, very nice looking downtrend on Bitcoin. Could it pop a bit? Yes, it could, but it might reject again off our 20 EMA. So there's a slight downtrend being respected. So it's still looking a little bit more bearish for now. I do think Bitcoin will bounce later as we get into like June, maybe a little bit into it. But for now, it's still looking kind of weak. How about for Tesla? Tesla to me is not looking, too amazing. It's just trading sideways, honestly. It's just trading completely sideways. So it's been getting rejected off this 180 area for the past 2.5 weeks. We get rejection off 180. We get bought up at 173 to 172. Back and forth price action almost the entire time. There was one instance where Tesla got a big push well above this because of some bullish news that came out involving their new robo-taxi design and also other factors involving Pepsi. But then we got a big rejection back down into the range, and we're just continuing to trade sideways. So as you guys can see, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's all Tesla's doing. There's no sign of a big break in either direction. We have support currently, and I think that Tesla could dip a little bit again tomorrow towards 174 to 173. Then we could look for a bounce back up to 178 and more sideways price action. To truly turn bullish, you want to see Tesla break past, in my opinion, not just 180, but a 182. If we do break that, then there is upside potential. If we end up losing 172, then we're bearish. We'll be dipping all the way down to about 168. Otherwise, it's just back and forth price action. That's all Tesla's essentially doing. So I think tomorrow we could dip a little bit into this liquidity zone. We love to bounce off the 173 area. You guys can see how it's been bouncing off this white line right here again and again and again. And then we could be looking for a bounce back up after that. So look for a dip to 173 to 174, a bounce back up to 178, and sideways price action for now. There's not really a whole lot going on with the chart. For the QQQ, we're looking a little bit more bearish. We're barely holding 455, and we also happen to have this gap to fill in the 453s. So look at resistance at 455.5. If we do break that, look at 457, 458, and eventually for the 459.5 area where this balance happens to be. If we lose 455, our next support is going to be all the way down here at in the 453s. So I do favor that's going to kind of pop a bit and eventually make its way down lower. It might fill this gap down here at 453. Then we'll be looking for a bounce after that. It might be a little tricky for it to fall as hard as SPY because Nvda and Aapl are helping this up quite a bit. But just be open-minded to the possibility that the downside is more imminent, and it's going to likely get that dip. Will it be as fast as SPY? Maybe not, but it still will likely do it. For Aapl kind of popped about the resistance right here in 192, then came back down. We have 190.5 as resistance, 192 above that. We have support currently at 189.5 around that range, followed by 188. What do I think we're going to do? Maybe pop a bit back to the imbalance in the 191.25 area, then just trade sideways in the range. That's all Aapl really did today, and we might just continue to do so as time goes on. Now for NIO, I just want to call out one thing about NIO stock before I conclude to the other ones. One thing I want to note is that NIO has upside potential, in my opinion, as long as there's no bad news. I say that because their deliveries are looking pretty good for the month. So they did 15,400 deliveries for the month of April. And then for the month of May, from the 1st through the 26th, they did about 15,000. I'm sorry, they did 15,600 deliveries in April, and they did 15,400 deliveries from May 1st to May 26th. So that basically tells us that they'll easily do, in my opinion, over 17,000 to 17,500 deliveries, well above that for the month, which is going to show big growth month over month and year over year for deliveries. And generally, when we get good pieces of data like that, the share price likes to soar. So we might get a very big bounce on either Friday or Monday for NIO, in my opinion. I do anticipate that. I think that we're going to get a nice push to the upside as the most likely possibility. So long as there's no major bad news, as long as there's no horrendous news that comes out, that is going to be the most likely possibility. So I do see a potential play there. But besides that, guys, that is it for the main five I typically talk about. Now I just want to focus on the rest of the tickers, be kind of brief with this part. So what do I see for Palantir? Palantir is looking a bit more bullish. Now we got this nice break on the 4-hour. Mine reads as 21.3, which is where our 50 EMA happens to be. And if we hold that, look for a push a little bit higher towards 21.7, looks a little bit more bullish. We did come down a little bit lower before getting a bounce, so that's a good sign for it. And we'll have to see how well it holds up here. We'll look for a dip and a bounce higher. That's the most likely possibility. So far, it's holding up very nicely, but I do think it's going to dip a bit first before we try to continue to go higher. For Super Micro, we're looking a bit more bearish. We did call this out yesterday, not looking that great. I called 850, and I told you if that broke, watch 840. You guys can see it actually went a little bit lower than that. I'll basically be watching this previous resistance becoming support, followed by the 820 area if that fails. And if this ends up losing support right here, I think we could be falling all the way down closer to 800. That looks a little bit weak to me, so I do favor downside a bit more on Super Micro. For Rivian is also kind of trading sideways within this range. We have resistance currently at this 10.6 area, and we support all the way down here at 9.94. I told you all it might hit the 200 EMA then reject, and that's exactly what happened. So now there's a risk of it dipping a little bit more, I would say towards $10, so I anticipate some downside. Exactly as predicted, SoFi is coming down. We have a head and shoulders like structure. I think it might continue to sink. It might start shuffling over here around 6.7. It does like to get bought up here. So look for a dip towards 6.7 and move back up in sideways price action here as we're approaching some key support. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're dipping a bit more. We're looking a little bit more bearish. We have this previous resistance becoming support at 200. It depends on if we lose 202 or not. We're trying to hold that. If we hold 202, look for 202.88 to be tested. And if that breaks, then 205 is our next target. If we fail to hold this 202 area, then we're going to be looking for a move all the way down to about 200, which is where our previous resistance happens to be. And the next support below that is 198. So I'll be watching these supports. I personally favor that's going to come down to 200 first before anything else. And we'll see how things go moving forward. For AMD, we're kind of dipping a bit, but it does love to kind of bounce off our 50 EMA if you guys look at this. So I wouldn't be surprised if we dip down to 163.4, a little bit more downside, and then we could try to bounce after that. But just know that the overall trend is still, it still has a bullish trend, technically speaking. So we will see if it holds 163 and bounces or not. If we dip to 163 and lose it, we're going to come all the way down to 160. If you hold 163 and bounce, we're going to continue the trend and remain bullish. So far, the trend is still bullish, so we'll give it some time. For ARM, same thing as AMD, bullish trend. Look for a test of 118. If we lose that, look for 115. We might test that in bounce, or we could lose it. So I think we're going to be testing that very, very soon. For Coinbase, we're on a very, very interesting trend right now. We have a nice double bottom like structure. We're actually approaching our 20 EMA support. If we bounce off this, we'll be looking for a push all the way up to about this 250 area. And if we lose 232, we're going to be dipping all the way down to about 226. In my opinion, the trend is still bullish on Coinbase, and we could be looking for a bounce over here. For Amazon, in my opinion, is actually on a bit of a downtrend. We have resistance. It's actually stuck between our supply and demand, basically. So look at this. It's been going back and forth again. We have resistance at 183.26. We have support at 180. We're just going back and forth for 4 straight days. So this could be an accumulation for a bounce, possibly, but we have to try to get back above 185. Otherwise, it's just sideways price action. Watch 180 as support, and then resistance at 183. It's just been going back and forth. If we lose 183, we turn bearish. 178 is coming. If we lose 180, then we're going to be dipping to 178. If we break past 183, we're going to push to 185. Otherwise, we're just completely range bound. For Meta, we're looking a little bit more bearish. We were trying to kind of balance from here. We now have this like head and shoulders like structure that's starting to gain some merit. But I think that I wouldn't fully just solely trade based off this. I think we're going to be testing our 50 EMA. 471.6 around that zone is going to be tested. If we lose this, then we're going to be dipping down here towards 468. If we hold this support, we're going to be bouncing. So I do anticipate a little bit more downside and watch this test if it loses this or not. So that's going to be key for the way we end up moving. For Microsoft, we're looking a little bit more bearish. Going to be looking for a test of 424. If we lose this, we're going to be dipping all the way down towards 420. If we hold this, we could bounce. So look for a test of 424. For Google/Alphabet, watch 177 as support. If we lose this, we're going to be dipping down to 175. If we hold this, we're going to be bouncing back up towards 179. Otherwise, we're actually kind of trading sideways right now, so give this some time. For GME, we're looking a little bit more bearish. I think 20 is going to be tested. If we lose that, there could be a move all the way back down to 18 or 200 EMA. So there is some downside potential in this, so we'll see how things go. AMC also has a little bit more downside potential, looking a little bearish right now. We might be retesting basically 4.2. If we lose that, look for 4.13. Might be a little downside coming before it tries to rebound. DJT is still looking bullish, trying to break out. It's fighting resistance at 52, and we have support all the way down here at 48. I think that's kind of consolidating right now. It might just continue to trade sideways. Look for a little dip back down towards 50, a bounce back up, and some sideways price action. The VIX is also trying to break out, but we're approaching resistance right here in the 14s. It could go a little bit higher, but I wouldn't count on just exploding forever. We have like 3 gaps to fill in the VIX, so it's going to likely get a rejection soon. It might continue to go and get closer to 15, so it still looks bullish overall, but I do want to note that it might get rejected soon. The market may bounce soon. 10-year Treasury yield is pushing very hard. We have a lot of gaps to fill below. For now, it could be pushing for 4.68 if we do continue to push, and this is what's fueling the market to dip. The dollar is also bouncing thanks to gold kind of dropping. This is going to be approaching resistance around 105.2. If we break this, we could go a little higher towards the mid 105s basically. So that could lead to more downside as well. So what do I think about the markets? I think that there's a little bit more downside coming for SPY and the overall indices. I do anticipate a little bit more of a drop, but do I think it's going to last forever? Not necessarily. I think that the market will eventually find a bottom soon, either at 523 or 521 for a temporary bounce after that. But for now, just know that there's a little bit more downside coming. I do anticipate 523 at least for SPY, and we'll see how things go. That is it for the video, guys. Thank you all so much for listening. Have an absolutely incredible rest of the day, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you for listening, guys. See you tomorrow, and peace out.